What's up guys, Justin here with the renderingessentials.com. So I get a lot of questions about the kind of computers that I'm using in order to work with 3D modeling and rendering. In this video we're going to talk about the laptop computer that I'm currently using for 3D modeling and rendering. In the next video, if you're interested, we can also talk about my desktop computer. But for now, in this video, we're going to talk about laptops. So let's go ahead and just jump into it. Alright, so first off, this video is sponsored by MSI. So MSI reached out to me a few months ago and asked if I was interested in taking a look at this laptop. I definitely was, because the last laptop I had was also an MSI. So I had an MSI before, there was no sponsorship there, and I'm super excited to check this one out because I was happy with the performance I got with the last one. So my previous laptop was an MSI GS65, and now we're going to be checking out the MSI WS66. So the MSI WS66 is the laptop I'm currently using for 3D modeling and rendering. So one of the things that's always been important to me in a laptop is balancing portability with the actual processing and graphics power of the computer, right? Because I know you can get some laptops that are super big and they're just not very portable. They're not very fun to pull out and actually use. It feels like you're setting up a desktop computer, just getting them out. On the other hand, I also run some very graphics card intensive programs. So things like Lumion and D5 Render. So I need that kind of balance in there of something that's powerful enough to actually run those things while also being portable. And so I like what this laptop offers from a size standpoint. So it's got a 15.6 inch touchscreen monitor. So the monitor is a nice size. At the same time, it's not super big. So it's only 0.71 inches thick. It's also light, weighing in at like 4.63 pounds. So the nice thing about this is it's got the portability factor going on, which I like, but it's also not so small that you feel cramped when you're starting to work with it. So one thing I will note, just as kind of a construction estimator, is this keyboard doesn't have the 10 key on the right hand side of the page. So if you do have something where you want the 10 key, you would have to upgrade to the WS76, which is slightly bigger. That would have that larger keyboard as well as the 17.3 inch screen. So if you want the bigger screen, there is another version of this that does have that larger screen. It's a little bit heavier and a little bit thicker, but if you want more screen real estate and more keyboard space, then you could definitely upgrade to that as well. Personally, I feel like there's plenty of real estate on this laptop to work. So under the hood, it's running an Intel i9-11900 processor. So you can look up all the different benchmarks on that and the comparisons. For me, it runs faster than the desktop card that I have in my desktop computer. So it's actually an increase in speed with all of that portability. So I'm pretty happy with that. And then from a graphics card standpoint, it's running the NVIDIA Quadro RTX A3000. I have not had any issues with the A3000 so far, but I do know that if you get into like the larger scenes in like a Lumion or something like that, you may want to look into something with the Quadro RTX A5000. Also, if you're going to be doing any virtual reality, the A5000 might be a better bet. The A3000 does meet a lot of the minimum requirements, but if you've ever done anything with VR, you know exceeding those can be better. So if you do have the expectation of doing a lot of VR, you may want to look at the one with the A5000 card in there, as it's going to be a lot more powerful. So far, I've had good performance with the A3000 using any of the scenes that I've worked with. So it's kind of a, you kind of need to know what you're going to be working with type thing. So from a hard drive standpoint, it's got a terabyte solid state drive in there, which is great. Previously, the GS65 that I was using had 500 gigabytes in there, which is fine, but I found that with all the different 3D things that it filled up pretty quick. The terabyte, I think, feels a lot better from a size standpoint. So I'm pretty happy with that. And then it's also got 32 gigabytes of RAM in there. Like I said, there is a version where you could update or upgrade to the 64 gigabytes of RAM. Again, that's probably going to be if you have like super big scenes or something like that. So unless you have a special need, I think the 32 gigabytes is probably going to be fine. So a few other features that I like about this laptop personally. So it comes with kind of the standard power brick that you might see with different computers. So I think this one is, let's see, I'm not 100% sure. I think this one provides like 230 watts of charging power, but it's just kind of, these are all a little bit big and clunky, right? They take up a bunch of space in your bag. But one of the cool things about this is it also allows for Thunderbolt charging, meaning you can use a cable like this one, so like a USB rated cable. So I will link to this one in the notes down below, but this is a 100 watt rated fast charging cable, and you can actually use a charger like this one. So you need a certain wattage to do this. So the one that I'm using offers 100 watts. I will link to this in the notes down below as well. But what this does is instead of me having to carry around the big like clunky power block, I can just throw these in my bag. And then I leave the power block one plugged in at home. And so another thing that I really like about this is I can also dock it. So what I've done is I've bought an external docking station, and what I can do is I can plug it into that docking station and I can run this on 2 monitors. So if you've ever worked with multiple monitors and then you've gone back to the single monitor, you know it's just not as productive. So what I'll do is I'll go out and I'll work on something and then I'll bring it home and I'll just pop it onto that docking station. So this is another docking station that I bought off of Amazon. I can link to it in the notes down below. But for me, the ability to plug in and use multiple different monitors is really a big deal.
All right, so I thought real quick what I could do is I could pull up a couple real-time rendering engines, in this case Lumion and D5 Render, just give you kind of an idea of how the laptop performs. So one thing that's going to be important when you're working with these programs is if it is possible, try to plug it in, because you're going to get better performance out of the laptop when it's on full power, as opposed to just working off the battery. It can work off the battery, but try to plug it in if at all possible. All right, so now let's take a look at the benchmark results when we benchmark this for Lumion. So if we look at the benchmark page, notice that the processor is 100% full, totally everything that you would need from a processor standpoint. So system memory is good. It goes to the recommended. I'm a little surprised that the full value for Lumion is 64 gigabytes of RAM, but you definitely meet the recommended requirements. The graphics card, so I've had no issues with the graphics card. It shows as being slightly under the recommended, but I haven't had any issues with it whatsoever. Just note that if you are going to use those larger projects, like we talked about before, you may want to think about upgrading to the A5000. But let's go ahead and let's load up one of the example files. So in this case, let's go ahead and let's just bring in, I think the Farnsworth is fairly intensive, so we can go ahead and bring the Farnsworth in. It has a lot of different points and other things like that. But notice how when I load this up, you can hear a little bit of a hum in the background of the computer working. It's not super loud. It's actually a lot quieter than the gaming laptop that I had, the GS65. So right now you can see how I can fly around in Lumion, and my frame rate is fine. Everything looks fine. This will show you how many frames you have up in the upper right hand corner. So right now we're sitting at like 28, 29 frames per second. Now if we were to go in and turn our settings up, so if we were to turn our editor quality to super high and leave our resolution right here, and then jump back, notice how this is going to be able to run everything on super high as well. So you notice how I'm not really dropping frames, it's not really clunky or anything like that. I'm getting a pretty good result in here. Note that my frame rate is down a little bit from what it was when we were just one step lower in the editor. But overall, if I jump into like photo mode or something like that, it's going to render out images just fine. So you're not going to have any issues with that. You can see how you can preview this. You can jump between the different scenes, and you can do a preview render in here, and I'm getting great results. So you can see how this can run in Lumion. Let's go ahead and let's run D5 render real quick. So we'll just jump over to D5, which has some pretty hefty requirements. And so we can go ahead and we can start off just running the church on the water. That's more of a lightweight rendering, but it'll give us kind of an idea of how D5 render operates on that lightweight setting. Again, you do want to make sure that you've plugged your computer in when you do this. So we're going to go ahead and load this up real quick. Notice how this all loads in really nicely, and you can fly around the scene. No real issues here, but again, this is kind of a smaller scene. So on the smaller scene, no problems whatsoever. If we wanted to render out an image, for example, we could jump into our image and we could go ahead and we could click on the button right here to render. You can see how this is going to go through and this is going to render this out. And D5 always does have to do some kind of thinking in the background to render out images. So nothing surprising about this taking a little while. Again, you can hear the computer warming up a little bit, but it's not running like super heavy or anything like that. Again, my GS65 would have run a lot hotter than this one is right here. And so if we take a look at that render, you can see that that rendered out fairly quickly. So now let's jump over to the city model, which is a much bigger model. So we're going to go back to our welcome page, not save our changes, and we'll just open up the city view. And so for the city view, so if we look at this building, for example,
just like this, you can see how this works nicely once all the assets are kind of loaded in, right? So you can come down here and fly down. You can see how this is all going in real time, and it's going really quickly. I can also jump between these different scenes in here, and you can see how I'm getting the nice reflections in here and other things like that. So it was a little slower to get the initial assets loaded in. Some of these aren't loaded in just because my computer doesn't have them downloaded and up to date, and I have slow Wi-Fi. Doesn't have anything to do with the actual PC performance itself, but you can see I can fly through and look at these different I can look at these different settings. I can adjust the lighting in real time, and again, I mean, the computer is definitely working in the background, but it's definitely giving me a good result. So I think it's still doing a good job in here, and I'm still fairly happy with the results that I'm getting and the speed that I'm getting as well. And notice how we are set on high quality preview mode. So this definitely works with something like D5 Render, which does have those higher graphics card requirements.
So in addition, there are a number of programs this laptop is actually ISV certified for, meaning that they basically worked with the program authors in order to make sure that the laptop is going to meet the system requirements to have a good experience. So for example, they're ISV certified with Autodesk, with Enscape. So if you want to run Enscape on here, they're ISV certified by Enscape, as well as like Graphisoft if you use like ArchiCAD or anything like that. So there are those certifications in there as well, so you know the laptop's been tested for working with those programs. All right, so from a battery standpoint, they do have a 99.9 watt-hour battery, which I believe is a larger battery. I have not done in-depth testing on the battery. Most of what I do is plugged in, so it hasn't really been that big of a deal. When Joseph Kim went through and did his detailed review of this laptop, he said he was getting something like 2.5 hours when working with SketchUp, and then I think he got 8+ hours on the idle test. So you can expect, if you were using like a Lumion or something like that has the heavier usage, that battery life is obviously going to go down. It's all kind of dependent on what you're using and what you're running. So that's kind of what I've heard about the battery life. I haven't done in-depth tests on that. So from a wireless standpoint, it does offer Wi-Fi 6E support, meaning that on that new spectrum, you'll be able to access that. That's kind of a future-proof type thing, so that's something that's still kind of under development. It's kind of a new development, but there is support here for devices on that spectrum. So if you are running Wi-Fi 6E, first off, there's a great article about what is Wi-Fi 6E that I can link to in the notes down below, but it is something that is going to be developing, and this laptop is ready for that so that it can work on that spectrum. So from a faster Wi-Fi standpoint, if you are connecting into the right networks that have that, you're going to be able to utilize that. That's going to be very network dependent.
All right, so that's kind of an overview of the MSI WS66. That's currently the laptop I'm using for 3D modeling and real-time rendering. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below, as well as if you're interested in me talking a little bit about my desktop computer, let me know in the comments down below as well. But if you're looking for more information on that laptop, I will link to that on this page. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this, and I will catch you in the next video. Thanks, guys.